Hi everybody, welcome back to the second video on measurements. Today we are looking at units of area. And I want to start this video by asking you the question, how large is a soccer pitch? Well, if you look this one up, you'll find that the length is 105 meters and the width is 68 meters. When we're talking about area, we're talking about assigning a number to describe how much space is inside a shape. So in this video, I'm just going to talk about the units of area. We're not going to worry about how we assign this number, but many of you will already know that for a rectangle, we want to do 105 times 68, and that'll give us some number, but it's not going to be in meters anymore. I'm going to need to define a new unit called meters squared. Now, for most of you, I suspect that when we wrote this m and this little 2 above, it was a bit confusing. So I'm hoping to try to clear up any confusion that there is about this, and then we'll learn about different units for larger and smaller areas as well. So more coming in the future videos about how we actually calculate areas. Today we just want to describe the units. So the first question that we want to consider is, what is a square meter? So here's the definition. A square meter is the area occupied by a square with dimensions 1 meter on each side. So we say the area of a square with length 1 meter is 1 meters squared. So this area here inside the square, this area is 1 meters squared, or 1 square meter. It's literally a square formed by sides of 1 meter. Now, you may be familiar with this idea of multiplying a pronumeral by itself, and that gives us an index of 2. If I multiply that pronumeral by itself 3 times, I get m to the 3. So really, what we're doing here is we're saying 1 meter times 1 meter is 1 times 1 times m, and that gives us 1 meters squared. So, for example, if I gave you another shape, something like this, where each box was 1 meter by 1 meter, and I wanted the total area of this shape, what I could do is count the number of squares. So if I know that 1 square has an area of 1 square meter, then the total area would be not 1, but 6 square meters. And I'm going to write square meters with this symbol m to the power of 2, or literally m squared, or meters squared. Okay? So once I've defined the area of 1 square with 1 meter on each side, then I can calculate areas of shapes with different sizes by counting the number of squares. So if the yellow square has an area of 1, and I've got a shape with 6 of those squares, then the area is 6, and my unit is meters squared. Okay. So we have just discussed the square meter. So if I have a square with side lengths 1 meter and 1 meter, I will define this area to be 1 meters squared. If I had a larger square, for instance, that had lengths 1 kilometer and 1 kilometer, it shouldn't surprise you that the area is going to be a square kilometer. And I'm going to write that as km to the power of 2. Similarly, if I have a square with lengths 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter, then the area is going to be 1 square centimeter. And I will denote that by writing cm with a power of 2 to indicate that I have made a square. I've multiplied the unit by itself. Finally, if I have a really, really small square, 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter, then the area is going to be 1 millimeter squared, or 1 square millimeter. Now, for reasons that I don't fully understand, your textbook wants you to know what a hectare is. It's a somewhat commonly used unit, and I'm just going to give you the definition. It is 10,000 square meters. So this is obtained by making a square with 100 meters by 100 meters. I'll just take that as a definition, and you'll be able to do the first question on the work program. Now, in the last video, we asked the question, if I gave you a length in one of these units, millimeters, centimeters, meters, kilometers, can I convert from one unit to the other? And I want to pose that question here. If I give you a unit of area rather than length, can I go back and forth? And the answer is yes. So I just want to show you what this looks like for the simplest example, and that is to go from a square centimeter and ask the question, how many tiny squares of 1 millimeters squared will fit inside a square centimeter? So I'm asking the question, 1 centimeters squared, how many millimeters squared? Well, if we recall an important fact, which is that 1 centimeter is 10 millimeters, then what I'm going to have inside this really large square is 10 squares per row and 10 squares per column. So I'm going to have 10 times 10, or 10 squared, which gives me 100. So there's actually going to be 100 of these little tiny squares inside this big square. And so the answer to this question is that 1 square centimeter is the same as 100 square millimeters. Okay? keep that in mind, because now using very similar arguments, we can go and convert between the other units as well. So we just saw, to go from centimeters to millimeters, I needed to multiply not by 10, but by 10 squared, because it was 10 times 10. So just remember, 10 squared is the same as 10 times 10. If I square a number, it's the same as multiplying that number by itself. Now, what if I did the same thing going from a square meter to a square centimeter? Well, this time I would have 100 squares per row, and I would have 100 rows. In other words, I would have 100 times 100 square centimeters inside a square meter. What if I went from square kilometers to square meters? Well, this time I'd have a really, really large square, 1 square kilometer, and I would have 1,000 meters on each side. So if I treat the square meter as the small square, I would have 1,000 squares per row, and I would have 1,000 rows. So the number of tiny squares would be 1,000 times 1,000, or 1,000 squared. I hope you're seeing that these numbers 10, 100, and 1,000 are what are appearing down here as well. All I'm doing when I'm dealing with area rather than length is adding a square to each factor. Now, what if I wanted to go the other way? What if I wanted to go from a smaller area unit to a larger area unit? Well, the answer is simple. Instead of multiplying, we're going to divide by the same number. So to go from square millimeters to square centimeters, I divide by 10 squared, and so on. Instead of multiplying by 100 squared, I will divide by 100 squared. Instead of multiplying by 1,000 squared, I will divide by 1,000 squared. And because these two charts are so similar, you actually just need to learn this one. Because if you know this one, you can easily write down the one for area, as long as you change each number to the number squared. Why do I square the number? It's the same reason why when dealing with this argument here. Okay, so that's the reason why. If you had trouble following that, don't worry about it. Just remember this rule here. Square the factor if you're converting area instead of length. So make sure you've got this in your bound reference. And let's finish with some examples. So it's up the top, in case you've forgotten. So let's suppose I want to go from square meters to square centimeters. I'm going from a larger area to a smaller area. What I need to do is multiply by 100 squared. So 25 times 100 squared is the same as 100 times 100 for 100 squared. So this is actually 10,000. And if I multiply 10,000 by 25, I'm going to get 250,000. It's very large. Why? Because there's 100 centimeters in a meter, or 10,000 square centimeters in 1 square meter. The reason why the number is so large is because I've got this squared term. I'm actually doing the multiplication twice. Okay, second example. Let's say I wanted to go from square centimeters to square millimeters. To do this calculation, I need to multiply by 10 squared, which is the same as 100. So 25 times 100 is going to give us 2,500 square millimeters. Okay, next one. Now this one's going to be massive. I'm converting from square kilometers to square centimeters. So I actually need to do two calculations. I need to multiply by 1,000 squared first, and then I need to multiply by 100 squared. So let's do it. The number 1 times 1,000 squared times 100 squared. Now, this is going to be massive. You can use a calculator if you want to. Based on my experience, I'm seeing that there are going to be 10 zeros after the 1. But you can just use a calculator if you need to. Okay? So it's massive. And the reason why it's massive is because there's a lot of centimeters in 1 kilometer, and I'm squaring because I'm dealing with area. Okay, last one. I want to convert from square kilometers to hectares. And for this, I need to remember that 1 hectare is the same as 10,000 square meters. So keep that in mind. Let's start by converting from square kilometers to square meters. To do that, I need to multiply by 1,000. So 1 times 1,000 squared. This is going to give me 6 zeros, so 1 million square meters. Now, to go from square meters to hectares, what I need to do is divide by 10,000. Actually, I might reverse the direction because hectares is larger, just to keep things consistent. So to go from hectares to meters, I multiply by 10,000. To go the other way, I divide by 10,000. So I've got my quantity, 1 million square meters in meters squared. So now I need to divide by 10,000 to get my answer in hectares. And if I do that, 1 million divided by 10,000, my answer is 100. Okay, so you've got everything you need now after these first 2 videos to do the first question in the work program. In the next video, we'll start looking at actually assigning areas with these units to different shapes. See you in the next video.